All right, microphone is on. Can everybody hear me? And hello. We'll get started at about, I don't know, 1:05 or something like that. If you guys have any questions, please ask them now. Hope you're doing well. We just got a snowstorm last night. 3 inches of snow, so I'm kind of waiting for that to thaw and figured I would do, live YouTube. So just double checking. Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. So I'm in a older farmhouse. We have one wire coming in here. If the internet goes out for some reason, I'll try and reboot, and I will try up until 1:30 in case there's a problem if you hang around. But hopefully it goes smoothly and we can just talk. So today's subject, so the pop-up videos, and I apologize for not having more scheduled videos. I'm just busy, so I'm trying to figure that out. But since it snowed yesterday, there's not much I can do in my garden, so I figured, maybe we could meet this way. Main questions that I'm getting now are about fertilizers. What are NP and K? Compost manures, really using these for your spring beds. I'm getting questions about the dig, no dig gardens, all that. So we're going to go over that today. Ocean bleed, yellow. I would give them some more nitrogen. So, and we're going to talk briefly about what nitrogen is, phosphorus, potassium, but I just want to talk more about using these in your garden, not spending a ton of money, and just how to have your garden ready, for the spring. And I'm just going to check the chat. Again, throw out questions if you need to or want to. And we'll wait a couple of minutes to get started. People's gardens are under snow right now. Mine was not. We were getting really nice weather. I got about a quarter of my garden set up. Now we have 3 inches out there. Urban Chicken Mama, I love endive. You can grow it really just like lettuces. It takes longer, but much more resistant to diseases, insect problems, and stuff like that. I actually forgot to start mine this year, so I'm going to be starting a lot of it, but I love endive. I like buying leafy greens. Like romaine, I can get pretty inexpensively at the store. So those loose leaf greens, I can get different places, but I can't get endive. It's hard to get spinach that I really like, kales and stuff like that. So I'm growing more greens that are harder for me to get elsewhere. And endive is one of those. Nevaeh C, I don't know. So sometimes people aren't getting notifications of my new videos. These pop-up videos are kind of, impromptu. So I'm only putting them out about an hour early. At some point, I don't want to even say I'm going to do it again because I didn't do it last month. I'm going to try and get a scheduled routine. But for those of you that don't know, I'm a board member of Community Ecology Institute, and I volunteer at Freetown Farm. And we are planning on doing a plant sale. We're getting the greenhouses up and going, and I'm actually helping with all of that. So I'm pretty busy. Endive is very cold hardy. It can take a frost, just like the kales and spinach. Jack Rudin says, my peppers are turning purple and yellow. They've been getting fed bi-weekly with worm tea. It might be that the worm tea does not have enough nitrogen in there. So I would give them more nitrogen in this case and see what happens. Sometimes they can be a little bit purple from just the pepper itself. I have to see a picture. But if your seed's starting and they're turning yellow, the main thing to do is give them a little bit of nitrogen. And that can be in the form of fish emulsion, which smells terribly. I just used it the other day in my house. Or you can use the chemical types at a really reduced rate, like a quarter strength. Using chemical fertilizers on your seed starts, unless you want to be 100% organic, really doesn't matter. You take care of the plants at the seed starts, you get them out in your garden, you go organic, and be like me. I'm 95% organic, and I'm proud to do that. But the chemical fertilizers are just more convenient indoors, I think. All right, so 103. So let's get started. Officially, I will be checking the chat for questions. And again, if you put in there a question, I see some of you have already done it from last time. Just put in capital letters question. This way I can see it a little bit better. So when I do these pop-up lives, I don't have a moderator, so it's hard for me to catch everything. So this video is really about fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, N, P, and K, compost manures, spring feeding, dig versus no dig. These are all topics that I've been getting questions on from the comments from my videos over really the last 3 weeks now. So let's start with the basics. And feel free, like one of the things I keep saying that I love about the live is that you all are knowledgeable. You can help each other out. You can read each other's questions and answer them, because sometimes I miss them. So if we're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, if you have great sources, fertilizers that have them, please put them on there. I'll talk a little bit about them. But I don't want to get too lost into nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So here's kind of how it goes. Compost, and I've mentioned this before, when fully broken down, ready to go, nature's done its thing, you throw it all over your garden. It is less than a 1-1-1 N, P, and K. It's less than 1% nitrogen, 1% phosphorus, 1% potassium. It's got N, P, and K in a form that the plant can use it immediately, which means it's water soluble. It can be pulled into the root system. The plant can use it. There's still stuff in there that has to be broken down. But the key point is that it's a really low percentage of N, P, and K in your garden. Now, so when you look at a bag, and actually this might be kind of fun. When you look at a bag, you're going to see a name on there, and it will say something like tomato fertilizer. And it might be a 5-3-4 N, P, and K, 5%, 3%, 4%. That's what those numbers mean. It's the percentage by weight, I believe, in the bag or by volume, which is important, but not that important. So you also might see like leafy green fertilizer. You might see fruit fertilizer. You might see tree fertilizer. You might see pepper fertilizer. You even see something called heirloom fertilizer. That's all just fluff. It's not important. What you want to learn about is just the N, P, and K ratios on there. So I don't know, when you go out to the store, what are some crazy names of fertilizers you've seen? And I think they do that so that you think you have to buy a bag for peppers, and then you have to buy a bag for tomatoes, and you have to buy a bag for your leafy greens. Now, it's true that these plants might want different levels of N, P, and K, but I don't, you probably don't, broadcast your fertilizer perfectly. You don't stage more nitrogen here, more phosphorus here, more potassium here. Sometimes I do with like potatoes. So you can get really caught up in trying to figure out, is that 5-4-3 okay? Or is that 3-2-7 okay? What percentage of nitrogen do I need? Why are they calling this leaf? And it drives me crazy, because I believe it becomes a barrier for new gardeners to, one, spend their money wisely and on a budget and get a good deal, and two, sometimes to even get started. So does that make sense? That when you look at a bag, you're going to see numbers on there, and those numbers are N, P, and K. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are the main three elements that your plants need most. So that's what you're really adding to your garden, because without those at the right levels, your plants can suffer. And the right levels is the point that I want to stress, is remember, compost is well below a 1-1-1 N, P, and K. I think it's actually like 0.01 or 0.02, really low. So you don't have to overstress about these numbers on the bag. You just want to deliver nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to the garden with your granular fertilizers. And we'll talk more about granular fertilizers and water-soluble fertilizers in a second. Let me just check the questions real quick. And I'm scanning. What are all the, this is Natalie Diorio. What are all the green and white stuff growing on top of my soil in starter pots under my grow lights? I've used cinnamon, white stuff, to stop the white stuff from growing. So you can get molds and fungus on your seed starts. It's not always a bad thing. If you have a nice something that's dark green, that's usually because I get that all the time. I have algae in my water. The grow lights are the perfect conditions. The warmth of the house are the perfect conditions. So you get algae growing on top of your seed starting mix. Sometimes if you water a little bit less, let that top soil of your starting mix turn to a light brown, dry for a day or two. The tops can be dry for a day or two. Water stays in the bottom of the cell. And then that drying kills off molds, fungus, and algae. If you keep that starting mix always wet, always dark brown, always, and they're under the lights, they're going to grow algae and molds. I'm not sure what the white stuff is, but I get that sometimes too. Cinnamon's a good idea. You can put sand on top of there, but really letting that top of the starting mix dry for a good day or two makes a big difference. So this is a good segue. Emma Alvarez, question: what is a good fertilizer for lavender and/or rosemary? Thank you. So I don't know. And I don't know because, again, that compost is a 1-1-1 or less NP and K. So you might see something that says lavender fertilizer 644 or rosemary fertilizer 371. All those numbers don't necessarily translate to an even spread across your garden. So what do? This is what I do. Think about your garden this way. Nitrogen, that's the first thing. So nitrogen, if you do a soil test, usually they don't do nitrogen soil tests because that varies so greatly. Your plants use that in abundance. You have to replace that the most. The element of nitrogen is the key to green garden. So let me read this because I wrote it down. So nitrogen is green growth and photosynthesis. Also used for amino acids and protein development. The element is used by all plants. Too little nitrogen creates yellow leaves. If your leaves of your plants are yellow on the bottom and that yellow color is working its way up, that's usually a nitrogen issue. And the reason that happens is the plant will take the nitrogen from the lower leaves and send it to the top of the plant. So you see this progression of yellow working up the plant. And that's how you know that it's a nitrogen issue. You could have other issues with elements or fertilizers where all the leaves start to yellow and you have green veins. That's usually not nitrogen because you're looking for that pattern of it going from the bottom upward. So, and then if you over nitrify, putting too much nitrogen into the garden, it can impact how other nutrients are taken up by the plant. So what's the right level? I don't know what the right level is because when you say, let's just say you take a fertilizer that's a 5-5-5 NP and K, you read the directions, it says 1 cup or 1 pound or whatever per 100 square feet scattered evenly. I'm not even sure what that means. And that's hard for everybody to do. I put my hand in my fertilizer. You've seen me do it in videos. I scatter it around. Look at the coverage, looks pretty good. I walk away. Sometimes I mix it into the soil. Sometimes I let rain wash it in. So getting back to lavender and rosemary, coming into spring, your plants are going to probably need nitrogen. They're going to need to refresh their leaves. They're going to want to grow more leaves. They're going to want to just grow and come back to life. So nitrogen is going to be essential. So when you're looking at your plants in the spring, you want a higher nitrogen. That can be fish emulsion. That varies. The fish emulsion I use is Alaska brand. It has 5% nitrogen in there. That's pretty good. It's also water soluble. So you have the granular fertilizers that have to be broken down by soil biology, and it slowly releases nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other elements to your garden. Then you have fast release fertilizers that are water soluble. That means that they mix in water, the roots can pull them in real quickly. So getting back to lavender, getting back to rosemary, getting back to all your plants, anything that overwintered, all your perennial flowers, I would give them a good drink of water-soluble nitrogen right now. You could use the chemical types. I have no issue with them. I'll talk more about them at the end if we have time. You could use the organic, water-soluble, but you're giving them a big drink in the beginning of nitrogen, and then, you kind of let them go and monitor them. All right, so that's nitrogen. Someone said sound is off. Can we just do a double check? Okay, someone already did. Yeah, I've got the green light on my microphone, which now I'm paranoid about because I did like 15 minutes last episode with the microphone off. All right. In container gardens, does heavy rainfall, overwatering flush out fertilizers at a high rate? Not at a high rate, but it can. In containers, and this is from Jeannie Mario. So in a container, you have limited space. When your plants get bigger, they're just sucking the life out of that soil. So you really have to stay up on it with water-soluble fertilizers. Maybe amend them in the beginning of the season so that you've got the organic granular, the slow releases through the soil. It's not so much heavy rain and heavy watering, it's just washing everything away. I think it's like anions and cations and different ways things cling to each other. The container soil does pretty good. So that stuff stays in there. If it's, if you're watering it every day and you got water pouring at the bottom, you're going to wash it out. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. All right, sound is good. All right, so nitrogen. So just think of it this way. Everything's coming out of slumber. You want to give it some water-soluble nitrogen to get to the roots, get the plant growing. And you can do that for any plant. So then we get to phosphorus. It's needed basically to help the plant turn other nutrients, other elements into building blocks. And, I'm giving you the short version, but phosphorus helps get all the elements, all the nutrients into the right form so that it can go throughout the plant and the plant can grow, it can flower, it can fruit. If you have too little phosphorus in your garden, your plants are going to stay small and stunted. They may not flower a whole lot. But yellowing is not going to be an issue, generally speaking. If it is yellowing, it's going to be in a different way. It's not going to be a progression from the bottom to the top. And I can't give you an exact visual of what each deficiency looks like. You just, kind of have to go with, you don't need a ton of phosphorus, but you need phosphorus that is available to the plant. There's a lot of phosphorus in the garden that the plant can't access or use. And again, I'm going back to that compost where it's less than a 1:1 NP and K. You just have to have low amounts of these elements ready for the plant to take in. So that's phosphorus. You can get more phosphorus in bone meal, which is dried cattle bone that's crushed, steam crushed and pulverized, rock phosphate, and then in compost. And these slower release fertilizers, I would put in at the end of the fall or in spring. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, let's check for some questions real quick. Urban Chicken Mama, question. Thanks for bringing the raised beds, by the way. I'll be doing a whole series on fabric pots. I sell them, root pouches, at my seed shop. I will link in this video my Amazon shop if you want to check out different fertilizers, although you can use any of them, or if you want to check out some different things. So I actually, the 100-gallon root pouches are huge. I mean, they're just big. You can grow a lot in there. I actually cut a circle out in the middle of it only to let worms go in, and I think that's a good idea. You don't typically have to do that with fabric pots or root pouches, but in the 100-gallon one, I want more worms coming in there and breaking down some of the lesser quality materials that I put in the root pouch. When you have a root pouch or a raised bed that's really tall, you can put in like wood, leaves, stuff that's not decayed in the bottom, and then medium quality stuff in the middle, and then better stuff in the top. Let me note that down too, because it's the top 4 to 6 inches of the soil that's important. All right, so potassium. So potassium is the third element of the NP and K. Those are the 3 that are most important. That's why you see them represented on fertilizers. Jim W. question, is adding compost enough? It really is. If you have quality compost and you're putting compost in at the end of the season, in the spring, mid-season, you can grow wonderfully on just plain compost. And that's, something that I want to impress is that you don't have to get lost with, kelp meal, and then this bag of bone meal, and this bag of blood meal, and then this NP and K for leafy greens and stuff like that. You don't need all of it. You can use it. I use it, but I use it in a way I don't really worry about. I actually just buy stuff that's on sale, dump it all into a bucket, mix it through, and I scatter it through my garden. That's my organic granular. The ingredients are all basically the same. So potassium helps plants manage drought and use water through its systems. Water is needed to move nutrients from the soil through the roots into the plant. And that's key. Lack of potassium, you'll get stunted leaves, smaller looking leaves, dried leaf edges around your plant, sometimes browning on tips. Potassium helps your plant regulate temperatures. There's the stomata, which is just like a circle on the undersides of leaves, I believe, and they open and close. And that helps the plant regulate and manage temperature. Without enough potassium, that doesn't work well. Your plant can get heat stress. Plants are stressed, they can get more disease. So this is the general overview of N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. It comes in a slow release granular form, which means you put it in the soil, it breaks down slowly over weeks and months and gives to your plant. You have water soluble fertilizers that can deliver nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and that's in a form that the plant can use immediately. So let's go with that. Now, all right, let's check some questions. I see them popping up. Shine Island question: is the garden soil I've laid not enough? Should I lay compost over all of it? Well, maybe, and that's the next thing I wanted to get to. So everybody's garden soil, natural earth, is different. Some of us are just growing in containers, and I'll be doing videos on that, and maybe a live video on just container gardening. So when you go out to your earth for the first time and you drop down a raised bed and you read online, don't dig your garden or you're going to kill the worms and you're going to wreck the microbiology. Well, that's not true. Okay. Then some people say, I only use no dig. No dig is perfectly fine. Well, that's true and good for them. I have a no dig garden, which I love. We'll talk about that. It's not so much dig or no dig. And again, this is for the newer gardeners. It's just understanding what you're doing. So let's go back to 1950s when chemical fertilizers first came out, because it is true, if you use and abuse the water-soluble chemical fertilizers, you will kill out the life in your soil. But I use them sometimes. I use them a lot less over the last 5 years. I have never destroyed my soil using them because I'm using them in the way they were meant to be used. So in the 50s, they used to get these mass tillers and just grind the soil down to so many inches, and then they just douse it with the chemical fertilizers, and stuff grew great to start. And it grew great for years. And they kept grinding it down and over pulverizing it, which is what people are considering dig right now. Or that's not true. Dig means something different. But a lot of the fears about digging your garden come from this old way of tilling the heck out of the garden soil. So it's killing worms, it's grinding up everything, it's grinding up the layers of natural stratifications of microbes and stuff like that. And then it's just dumping on chemical fertilizers. So after so many years of that, after not using cover crops, after not putting in organic matter, after putting in so much chemical fertilizers that the plants don't even need it and it runs off to the water, you get all of the problems that we have. That soil, that earth just becomes dirt. You got the Great Dust Bowl, all kinds of stuff. So that's sort of my soapbox. I'm not saying grind our soil down and use tons of chemical fertilizers. So keep that in mind. When you dig your garden and you put your shovel in, you're taking up a big thing of dirt, you're flipping it over, you're putting some organic matter to the bottom. The worms are in there, they're okay. Maybe you accidentally kill a couple. The microbiology figures it out. Your plants grow through there. The roots loosen up the soil. Next year, maybe you have that heavy clay soil, you do it again. And then the third year, you do it again. Now your soil is great. You got a great 12 inches of soil. And now you go to the no dig version and you just put compost on there. I don't want people to fear that putting a shovel in a garden and turning the soil destroys everything. It's not true. You go back to the 50s to this crazy tilling that they did and this abuse of the chemical fertilizer. If you want to use a chemical fertilizer, water soluble, pour it on each plant, 1, 2, 3 seconds. Not a gallon, not 2 gallons, not every week, just a planting. Let it go back to your organic ways. If you don't want to use the chemical fertilizers, use fish emulsion, a little bit longer on each plant. That will get the green growing, that will get them going. I hope that makes sense. And you guys can talk about chemicals or organic. Everything's a chemical, number one. Organic gardening is beautiful and wonderful, and it's really meant about resourcing the amendments and needs that you want from your property, not going out and buying stamped products, which I understand is, commercialism and stuff. But if you're going to be an organic gardener, I just want you to understand each product and not rely on a stamp from some company or something like that. All right, let's check for questions real quick. Yeah, Budsville, USA. I'm 95% organic. Like last year, I used really all organic fertilizers. The year before that, I had a frost come in, damaged my peppers. I used some chemical fertilizers on there, water soluble, to get them going. I have tons of compost now. I don't even need the organic granular. I still have it because I impulsively buy stuff that's on sale. I mean, we get these crazy sales. I actually got 22-pound bags of Espoma plant tone for $1 a bag. There was like 60 of them. So I bought them all. I gave a lot of them to our farm, gave some of them away. But in Maryland, because we get winters, all the, all the current year gardening products go on sale in December and January, and then they replace them with the same stuff, but I'm getting these great deals. Yes, you can use fresh rabbit manure, but that'll get to the point when we get to manures too. All right, so this is why it's rambling, because now I've been rambling. I sort of lost track of what I was talking about. Oh, the use of dig versus no dig. So you can set up your garden by turning it. In the first couple of years, you might have to turn it some more. So it's that first 4 to 6 inches of your raised beds, your earth beds, that really hold all the nutrition. Like when you do a soil sample, it's usually like 6, 8, 10 inches. You take a sample from different places. So that's what you're doing when you're fertilizing. You're really feeding that top 4, 6 inches. Surface roots of most plants use that. Bigger roots go down into the earth, loosen it up, all that kind of stuff. So dig versus no dig, it's really up to you. If you have really heavy soil and soil that needs to be fixed up, I would put quality manure compost on there, maybe peat moss, some cocoa coir, scatter organic granular fertilizer, turn it over, break up the clay, set up your bed, maybe put more compost on there. And you just do that every year. So you can dig your garden if you want to. Budsville, USA. The problem with chemicals is that they push them in the front of the store and lack organic items until recently. So that's true. And that's really when we changed how we want to feed our garden with alternatives to the chemicals and alternatives, same companies that make the chemical fertilizers, keep in mind, now make organic fertilizers. So you really want to know the company you're buying from. You really want to know the products that you're buying from. And if I could do it, if I could say magically, how can I have all gardeners that are watching me right now have great gardens? I would say have tons of compost. That's all you really need. You put compost down in the fall, you put compost down in the spring, you put side dressings of compost middle of the season, you'll have great gardens. However, we can't all do that. So that's why I talk about all the pieces. Organic fertilizers are more expensive. Some people don't like using blood meal because it's from an animal. They don't like using bone meal because it's from an animal. They don't like pulverized fish because it's from an animal. So what are the alternatives? Compost, yeah. Maybe you can't make it, so maybe some chemical fertilizers. You could be like, well, I'm going to use feather meal. Well, that's from chickens, that had their feathers plucked out that we ate. So there's all kinds of different reasons we have for using different fertilizers in their garden. And I'm not going to judge anybody on it. I just want you to understand what you're using. And that's kind of what gets me. I'm good at being 95% anything. 95% organic, perfect. Move on. All right. So now it comes to compost and manures, and I think I was alluding to this. So you may watch me set up my gardens and videos in the fall, and I'll put down potash, firewood ash, and that's a great source of potassium sprinkled across, nothing crazy. Any kind of wood is fine. People worry about that too for, different reasons. I can't give you something that doesn't have a potential. Even when we talk about manures and compost, there could be a potential for harm. Most of the time, it's an overblown, crazy worry that gets perpetuated on the internet. So you'll see me put down alfalfa pellets, some potash, shredded up leaves, leaf compost in the fall. And then you'll see me in the spring throwing down some more potash because I just had a fire outside. I have some organic granular fertilizer that I left the bucket out. It got rained on. Now it's going to stink because once that organic granular gets wet, it just starts to mold and fungus, and it smells terrible. So then I just throw it on my garden. Sometimes you'll see me come to a bed that I didn't do anything for in the fall. So now you see me setting it up again with alfalfa, organic granular, some of my compost. The point is you don't have to do all of that. You can just set them up in the spring. You can just set them up in the fall. You can add in a little bit of this or a little bit of that. As long as you're sticking to the idea that you're trying to add some organic matter and fertilizer in the fall, and then organic matter and some fertilizer in the spring, your beds are going to be perfectly fine. You could do both. You could do one or the other. That's going to be enough really to manage for a season, generally speaking. So don't feel like you have to do everything that you see other gardeners doing. All right, let's see if there's any questions. So what time are we at here? 31 minutes already. So compost and manure. Compost is the best thing that you can make. So I did a video about leaf and I called it compost. And somebody said, well, that's not compost. It is compost. Anything that breaks down from an organic form into its basic components, breaks down, rots away, that's a composting process. Now you can have hot composting where you mix greens and browns and you heat up a compost pile and the microbes really take off. Microbes generate heat, everything breaks down. You could do a cold compost process where you're just piling stuff and it breaks down slowly. Leaf compost tends to be more of molds and fungus breaking it down slowly, and that's why it's called leaf mold. In either case, when you're buying compost or you're buying manures, there's no label, and this is where I probably actually agree there should be a label. There's no label that says this is 100% composted compost, or this is 100% composted broken down manure. The bags can say compost or manure, and these products can be in any level of composting, really. You know, maybe they were just dumped and it's only been a month and they're only 90% broken down. Maybe they're only 80% broken down. Maybe they're only 50% broken down. Maybe it says compost and manure and it's 50% wood chips that are actually shredded wooded fibers. Yeah, that could be compost, but that's not going to do much for your garden. It's just filler. So when you're buying bagged compost and manures, what I recommend is you learn the products. You have to know what you're getting. And do not take that compost, that manure, throw it into your spring garden, top 2 to 4 inches like it says, work it in, and then in a month, try and go and plant in it. The seeds, if that compost and manure has not fully broken down, the composting process is still active. So all that organic matter is pulling nitrogen from around the soil to break down. And then your seed is going to suffer because it's not going to be able to access that nitrogen and it becomes a mess. So you wonder why they germinate and then you have these little tiny stunted plants. And that's probably because your compost or manure was not fully broken down. Now, 3, 4, 5 months later, that'll be great stuff to plant in. But it's really hard to find a bagged product of compost, a bagged product of manure, a bagged product of both, and really find out how much it is fully decomposed is probably the right word. Is it to that point where it's fully broken down and it's just great fertilizer and elements and components and everything for your plants? Questions I don't know. If you guys know of a great product, mushroom compost is actually pretty good. But if you know of a great product, please put it up here. Any other questions? All right, so we covered no dig, compost manures, the basics on fertilizers. So spring feeding was kind of what I was talking about using the water-soluble nitrogen. I highly recommend fish emulsion. The Alaska brand is good because it's 5% nitrogen, 1% phosphorus, 1% potassium, water-soluble form. Your plants can use it right away. There's other fish emulsions, but sometimes I noticed they were like a 2-3-1 or just a lower nitrogen. So my fish emulsion, I'm really trying to target that 5% number. The other thing too is like when you're scattering a 5-4-3 fertilizer on the ground, it doesn't land on the ground. And then like in that planting space, you have 5% nitrogen, 3% this, 2% that. That percentage gets scattered everywhere. And then your garden is basically being fed as if you're doing what? Putting down compost. Yeah. So the NP and K gets spread out to well below a 1-1-1 NP and K across the garden space, just like you were using compost. Just something to keep in mind, because sometimes people think you're putting a higher percentage that matches the bags right where your plants are going. And it's not true. You're increasing nitrogen, you're increasing potassium and phosphorus, but at a much lower percentage that shows on the bag. I hope that makes sense. Drop my shovel, my shears, whatever. When they rust, I replace them. I don't throw them away. So I just have these rusted tools throughout the garden. And that became the name of the rusted garden about 11 years ago. And I just stuck with it. A lot of people think it's the rustic garden with, RUSTIC, but that's how I got it. And and maybe because now I'm getting older too, I love aged and rusted things. And maybe that's, a metaphor of, growing older, but I just like the way it looks, the memories that are attached to it, and just the idea of life, of how things age over time. Paragon Ridge, Gary, use goat manure, spent hay. I use goat manure, spent hay, casting tea as a foliar spray. I've had amazing results in my raised beds. At this point, should I test since the soil is working? So I kind of slurred through that, but Paragon Ridge. So soil testing, here's the issue. Let's hold this too. Thank you, Ria's Family Homestead, for the donation. Thank you, Gary, so much for all your videos. I've learned so much in my 4th year of having a garden. Keep up doing what you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for the donation. And just so you know, any donations that I get through here, sometimes I put donation links up on my channel. That's all going to Freetown Farm, and I use it for projects. So I very much appreciate that. So soil testing. So a soil test is basically going to different parts of your garden, digging out 6, 8, 10 inches of whatever, shovelful, mixing it in a baggie, send it away. That is wonderful if you are just going to garden for the first time and you've done nothing to it because you want to see what's there. In my opinion, if you've got weeds, bushes and stuff growing, you don't need a soil test. If it looks like it's suffering, you do. Once you start growing, and you see in my videos, I do all kinds of crazy stuff to my beds. I might have one bed that maybe is too high in phosphorus because I overdid it. Then I have another bed that's starving for phosphorus. So if you have raised beds all over the place, it's really hard to get a consistent read on the NP or the P and K level. They don't even test nitrogen because it's so fleeting and you always have to replace it. But you don't really get, in my opinion, an accurate reading unless you're every bed the same way, everything the exact same way. And to answer the question is if your garden is doing well on goat manure, foliar sprays, everything looks good, you're putting goat manure in there every year, you don't really need to get a test. Save your money and do something else. If all of a sudden you notice issues, you try and add in more fertilizers. If that corrects it, you're good to go. And then maybe you say, hey, I'm a little bit low on A, B, or C. But if your garden's growing, there's no need to get a test. Go grow on your own. Cheers. Love meeting gardeners from around the globe. I think that's one of the great things. So that he was saying, or she was saying that they have a stressed tomato plant. I didn't see exactly what it was, but if your tomato seedlings or your plants are stressed, you can correct it, try and reduce the stress. So maybe it was a lack of light maybe it got too cold. Slow and low feed of nitrogen helps stress plants. Helping them regulate the temperature helps stress plants. And sometimes you can just kind of keep them going, until the conditions correct, and then these plants take off. I've done that. Like I was saying, I had maybe 2 years ago, a frost came in, wiped out pieces of my pepper plants, like the leaves and sometimes the growing tip, and I hit them with chemical fertilizers. I wanted the high nitrogen in there. I wanted to really give them a boost. They came back quickly, went back to my organic ways. So you can have stress plants and you can manage them so that they come back okay. Thank you, Tammy B, for the $20 donation. And again, so I also have a website, a blog post where I show where these donations go. And I'll probably throw that into this later or in some of my other videos. But I like to show what money's coming in. We built out a youth garden, built an orchard. This year, I'm trying to buy actually a play area for the garden, and then do some more bed development. Very, very appreciated. Jolene's garden. This is a good question. How important is it to wait to plant after laying alfalfa pellets? So if you put down alfalfa pellets, which is a great source of nitrogen, a nice growth hormone that helps the roots, you can plant your transplants right away. The roots are established. You just don't want like a layer of the alfalfa in that top inch or two where it might still be breaking down a little bit and you try seeds. So it's really in a form that dries quickly, starts to be broken down by microbes quickly. So I think 30 days later, you can plant seeds in there. So you don't have to over worry about alfalfa pellets. But manures and compost that aren't fully broken down, that could be a 2-month or a 3-month wait. So you have to be more careful with that. All right, let's see if there's any more questions. Someone asked, how do you donate? I think there's a cash button that you can just hit that cash button right by the bottom of the chat, and you can do it that way. Jack Rudin, he's in Maryland Zone 7. That's where I am. Is it too late to start a flat of cool weather crops? No, you can certainly start one now. The dad, Dan. Hi, Gary. Any tips to rescue blueberry bushes eaten by deer for 2 years, but protected this year? So again, water-soluble fertilizer. You want to give them that fish emulsion. Blueberry plants, like bushes, like to have more acidity. So you can buy a chemical fertilizer that increases acidity. It's used for different plants that like that acid soil. That will help them a lot. Give them a huge drink of any water-soluble nitrogen and just, let them go. And if you protected them, you'll see that these take off really quickly. Now, pH test, just a side note, if you're growing blueberries and you want to test the pH of that general soil, you do want a more acidic pH down below 6 for them to do their best. So like my soil is actually a 7 pH. So when I add in more compost and stuff like that, I kind of get it, a little bit lower. My plants do okay. Around my blueberry plants, I am using, why did I just forget it? Sulfur. So I'm using sulfur to help increase the acidity. That is a way to do it organically. You have to be careful with that. Thank you, Todd Leslie, very much for the $20 donation, and Chris Hogan for $5. He says, hey, Gary, you rock. How do you deal with mosquitoes in the summer? I just get bit. Have some standing water, but not lasting long to use dunks. Yeah, so the chemical dunks aren't necessarily the bad chemicals. Like I have a hard time saying chemicals because everything's a chemical. Chemical dunks are usually BT, which is organic, and it kills off the larvae. So you can use that fine. I would just throw those dunks in there and help them kill off, the larvae. And then just finally, with the blueberry bushes, you probably have a great root system set up. It's just the growth keeps getting here. So give them that nitrogen, and I think that they're going to take off, and you'll be really happy with that. Tanya Raz, I watched you starting strawberries from seeds and have yellow alpines. I seeded them over a week ago, keeping the top moist and surface sowed on a heating mat, 70 degrees. No germination yet. Any tips? So yeah, so 7 days is too soon. Mine took almost 3 weeks, and they're really tiny when they germinate. They're about like this big now. So just stick with it. You can let the top dry a little bit. When a seed that's on the surface or any seed germinates, it sends a root straight down. So it's getting moisture underneath of itself. So you can let the top dry a little bit. But alpine strawberries can take several weeks to germinate, even on a heat mat. Jeannie Mario, question. The cabbage and lettuce transplants I planted last week got a taste of yesterday's snow and they're suffering. So they can. Cabbage will definitely bounce back. Sometimes lettuce, although it can take a frost, can freeze more quickly than cabbages and kales and stuff like that. So they die off. I would just, let them go. Let them kind of recover. Don't give them anything right now. Let the soil warm. Let the soil dry. They look like they survive but are struggling. Maybe in a week, give them some nitrogen. So I covered the main points of what I wanted to talk about in general. So we will go on for another 15 minutes for just answering questions. Chef Chris 01. Hi, Gary. Any advice on growing lavender seeds? So the germination for lavender is really low. If you have a chance, throwing it in the refrigerator for 4 weeks helps to stratify it, helps a little bit with germination, but it's still difficult. My recommendation, 3 or 4 seeds per cell, way overplant the amount you want. Be patient. It can take anywhere from really 14 to 21 to 28 days for it to germinate, and just plant more seeds than you think you're going to need. Sherry Nations, 4.5 to 5.5 is great for blueberries. Thank you. So that's on the lower end for your other plants. So like my blueberries are in one space. That's why I would just test the pH in that area, and then you work on regulating that down. So when you see my blueberry plants, they're doing really well because I brought the acidity down from that 7 pH that's around most of my property. Tammy B in Florida. Question. My native soil is loomy Florida soil. What can I do to be able to grow veggies in it? I grow in fabric pots, but would love to do a raised bed. So I've never seen the soil. I know it's really sandy. I also know that you have issues with nematodes, and I can't really think of a solution except to bring in lots of compost and really mix in the organic matter. Pots and containers are probably the best, or building raised beds that are 12, 15, 17 inches and filling that with quality soil is probably the best way to do it. But I don't know of a solution to easily and inexpensively fix up the soil in Florida because it is really, really sandy, very, very loamy. If anybody else has suggestions, please help her out. To Heather K, well, alfalfa pellets encourage weeds, and the answer is no. It's the plant. It's usually done before it flowers, so there's no issue. So one thing too, you're going to hear the word grazon. You're going to hear all kinds of herbicides that are used, and people are saying now, don't use straw, don't use hay, don't use alfalfa pellet. That might be true, but again, the idea is to know the farm or the product that you're buying. So the idea is that grazon or other chemicals can get into the organic matter that you're buying. You put it into your soil. There's leftover chemicals, damages the growth of your plant. True, it can happen. Does it happen all the time? No, it doesn't happen all the time. So you want to know where you're getting your product. You want to talk to the farmers if you're using hay or straw for mulch. I've been using Stanley? Whatever brand Tractor Supply Company uses for alfalfa pellets, not the organic version. Been using them for years. I've never had a problem with it. I've contacted them. I've talked to people. They don't spray anything that's going to be in there. But if you're not comfortable using something that's not stamped organic, buy the organic version, and it's going to be an additional $5 per 40-pound bag. Nancy Hoffman, thank you for the donation. Your videos are helping me so much. New gardener in New Mexico, zone 7B. I just lost it. Was that? I didn't catch it. Was that NM? All right, zone B. Just a little thank you. Sorry. So Nancy, welcome to really kind of being a new gardener in your first year. That's the whole goal that I want to do. I want to really make gardening accessible to all people. It really, brings joy to my life. You can tell, I have a passion about it. But I like just this conversation. We're almost to an hour. I could probably sit here for 2 hours. I want everybody to be able to do that. I know there's concerns now with the supply chain. Growing your food doesn't have to replace the grocery store and farmer markets. It can just be an addition to it. But I don't want people to think that you can't do this and you can't do that and you have to do it this way and you got to spend $1 million on 10 different kinds of fertilizers. You don't. Just stick with the basics. Robbie P. Hey, Gary, just started gardening this year. Congrats on your first year. Growing tons of different vegetables. Arizona 9A. I bought some seed potatoes and they have sprouts about 4 to 8 inches long. Are they okay to plant? So, yeah, I mean, you really want them to be, like this. I would still try and plant them. They're going to establish root systems. They're going to grow new growth anyway. I wouldn't throw them away, but maybe kind of experiment and put them all in one place, see what happens, and get some other seed potatoes. I just saw a click away. Let me go back. All right, well, now I figured that out. I could have rescued the last comment that I missed. We own a feed store. You can get a 50-pound bag of alfalfa pellets for under $20. Let me just add to that. So if you go and buy ground up alfalfa in a 5-pound bag, you're going to be paying 6, 8, 10, sometimes more for that. You can buy the 50-pound bag for $20. Figure out the great cost savings there. Comes in pelleted form. You water it. It breaks apart into almost sawdust. You use it just like that 5-pound bag you would buy where you're spending way too much money for it. Somebody asked about, I use the Tractor Supply alfalfa pellets for years. They work really, really well. Here's a good question. Pamela G. Do you rotate plants in garden beds? Some say it's not important. What do you think? I think that it's not important. I think that if you're farming on a large scale and you've been growing an acre of crops here and all kinds of insects and stuff come in, you want to move the plants somewhere else. You want to change how you're putting in fertilizers in the soil. Perfect for farms. In a garden even my size, any disease over here is going to float over there. Any insect over there is going to get over there. I'm always adding compost. I'm always adding amendments. So I'm not having plants suck the life out of, one side of my garden where they have to be moved. So if you are putting in regular amendments to your soil, you're feeding them, you're taking care of them, you don't really have to move them. The insects found your plants anyway. The diseases found your plants anyway. So in a small space, rotating isn't going to do much good. You can do it if you want, but it's not going to stop a pest infection that happened on the left of your garden from finding it from, finding the plants you put on the right side of the garden. It's really for bigger scale. Just reading questions. So, and then for manures, so when you get, fresh horse manure, cow manure, those are the two main ones. You really, in my opinion, want them to sit for a full year. Just go through a whole year of breaking down. And then if you have a continuous supply, you make the next pile next to that. And then, you kind of get the supply from the year before, you use that in your garden, you pile up the new stuff. Following year, you use that. You really want horse manure and cow manures to break down. Goat manure is really interesting because I think the number of chambers they have in their stomach, by the time it comes out of the animal, it's really well broken down, and you can pretty much use it really quickly in your garden. Anybody who uses goat manure, please, confirm that. But if I were to get animals, if I had time to take care of them, I would get goats for the goat manure, because the composting time is really just about nothing. I would feel comfortable throwing that in my garden in the spring, waiting a month or so, and then planting right into it. All right. Well, let's finish up in the last 5 minutes or so with any more questions. Someone's talking about mushroom compost. I really like that. It wasn't too unreasonable. I mean, sometimes the bag stuff is, in my opinion, too expensive. I've done videos and stuff on raised bed soil, container soil, how to make your own. Sometimes manures are a little bit expensive. But if it's quality and they really took the time to break it down, I don't mind paying a little more for that. And sometimes mushroom compost is good. Jay Dixon, I'm embarrassed to answer this. Are Gary's live streams on a regular schedule? Gary keeps talking about getting a regularly scheduled 1 or 2 live stream per month, but he's not been able to pull it off yet. So he does these pop-ups. So if things work out, I will have some standard times. My standard time will be Sunday at 1 o'clock, but I just haven't picked a theme for that where I put it out a week or 2 ahead of time. So I will also do these pop-up impromptu ones, even though this one was at 1 o'clock. They could come out any day of the week. And I hope to be doing some at 7 o'clock at night so that it crosses over to Australia. Doris Romines, how do you keep raccoons and squirrels out of the garden? So I have to trap squirrels. You have to trap and release. Same thing with raccoons. Check with what you're allowed to do in your area, but trap and release works well. You have to take them many miles away. But that's the only way that I found that you can take care of them. I tried talking to them and kind of reasoning, like, just eat from this bed, but nothing listens. So if you have pests, you have to get rid of them. So Kathy Baker, any tips on starting 90-year-old dahlia seeds? I know, but I would love to know what happened. You find another live event here, please let us know. I started tomato seeds that were 15 years old, but I don't know. How long should horse compost sit before using? I think a good year. It really needs to break down. So Jay Dixon says, tip, local mushroom growers let you haul compost for free. So if you can build relationships with farmers, mushroom growers, landscapers, you can really save a lot of money. So if you can find somebody who's growing mushrooms, a lot of times, very true, they'll let you take it away for free. Farmers will let you take manures for free. I like that I have a landscape company now that when they cut trees down, they'll stop by my house. They'll dump all the cut lumber, which I then cut into firewood. It saves me a lot of money. So try and build relationships with, and that's what I actually consider more of organic gardening, to be honest with you, is where you take resources from your property, use that for your garden. You build relationships with people near you. You use that for garden, and it's just an organic process of kind of, where the garden is, using the surrounding areas, and just using all that stuff. It's not just the organic stamp. And I know that's my soapbox, and I appreciate all of you that are 100% organic. What I don't appreciate are people that are 100% organic and slam the hammer down on new gardeners, telling them things that aren't necessarily true. Say that with a grain of salt, because every time I say I'm 95% organic, I get, all these comments. Well, I'm not going to follow you anymore and stuff like that, but so be it. Robbie P, thank you for the donation. One more question about tomatillos. Should I prune like an indeterminate tomato? Also, I have some about a foot tall. Should I let them flower? They grow crazy. And I did not do much pruning. You can prune them if you want. It's really up to you. I've heard that you need 2 different varieties for better pollination. I found that not to be true. I've used 2 of the same variety. I've also just grown 1 plant before and gotten plenty of the tomatillos on there. So you can really, prune it as you wish. I find that I don't get much disease on them, so that's why I kind of let them go. I do get flea beetles on there, so I will lightly dust them or manage them for flea beetles. But otherwise, I just kind of let them go. I would only prune to manage the size for containment. All right, it's 1 o'clock. I mean, it's been 1 hour. I'm going to keep going for a little bit longer. WV Big Beef question, Gary, can you go over using a hoop house to start seeds? Well, I don't use a hoop house. I have, similar greenhouse that I'm doing at the farm. So it really boils down to this. What is the temperature in your hoop house? So if you're not getting frosts, you can pretty much start planting anything. Your warm crops are going to take longer to germinate because they like that 60, 70-degree temperature to germinate. Your cool weather crops will do great in a hoop house, even can take a little bit of frost. So it's really figuring out the warmth. And then and I'm assuming you're starting in the hoop house and you're taking them outside. So you want to get the timing down so that when they're coming out of the hoop house and getting into the ground, they haven't been growing beyond sort of their prime in the hoop house. That's the very short version. But I think it'll take some experimenting and, just kind of taking notes on when you started warm crops, tomatoes, peppers, how the cool crops are doing and stuff like that. Kaylee, thank you for being the moderator. There's someone asking if you can add shredded cardboard directly to the raised beds. So I wouldn't put it on top of my soil, but when you're filling raised beds, you can put lots of compost on the bottom. I tear cardboard up. I mix shredded cardboard, finely shredded, with my green grass to create a hot compost. The cardboard breaks down, the grass breaks down. I use the compost that way. Cardboard is fine to use. Of course, take off the plastic. I wouldn't use anything with shiny print on it. I'm just never sure what those chemicals are, but usually the flat prints are safe. But you can use it in your garden. I use it under my mulch when I'm mulching my paths. It breaks down really fast. Plants grow through it. I have a no-dig garden, which you do set up by, you just put down like 2 levels of cardboard, 4 to 6 inches of compost on top. Maybe we'll kind of wrap up there. So if you want to do a no-dig garden, I just went out to my property, clay soil, same soil, put down the cardboard, 6 inches of compost on top, fully broken down. I planted right into it. The plant roots go through that 6 inches of compost. The wet cardboard keeps the weeds from coming up. The roots go through the cardboard breaks down. The plants do really well. Following year, 4 inches of compost right on top of the previous compost in that no-dig garden. And I basically built layers of great soil right on top of cardboard, no dig. How was that for the super short version? All right, let's take a quick look for some last questions. Do you ever overwinter onions? I don't. I start my onions by seed. This is from Bob Fry. Really in January. Overplant them into a little container, get them sprouted, get them used to the outdoors, take them outside, peel them apart. The roots are really strong, and I just pop them in. So I start my onions from seeds. Catherine Ferrari, any tips for gardeners who live in an apartment? I don't know if you have a balcony or not, but I would definitely try and get started and learn. There's only so much you can do on a windowsill. But if you live in an apartment, check with family and friends that have property. Tell them you'd like to grow a garden. You'll split the produce with them. Sometimes communities have community gardens that you can rent and get space. But you can learn in an apartment about the things needed to have a healthy garden. And then as you get more space, you just do more. Jesse Ruiz, what is the best things to use on squash bugs? Your fingers. Look for them and kill them off. Look for their eggs, these orange shiny eggs on the undersides of the leaves, remove them. And then use insect dust on the stems of my plants that are problematic. Remove all the flowers so that dust isn't going to where bees and pollinators go. And I put it right on the stem, let them crawl through that. It helps a little bit, but they're really, really hard to control. Mountain Creek Homestead, peppermint Castile soap is a great pesticide. I sell peppermint oil at my seed shop. I love it. I use the peppermint oil undersides of bean plants, controls the Mexican bean beetle, controls spider mites on my cucumbers, generally a good insecticide and repellent throughout your garden. It smells wonderful, very safe. I like it. It's helped change the way that I garden. I primarily use neem oil, now hydrogen peroxide, peppermint rosemary oil, and then I will use insect dust where I need to. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me this Sunday. I'm, glad it snowed because it kept me inside and I was able to do this. Take one more last question, and then, I will try and schedule a set time, but it's just hard, with my schedule. I'm actually volunteering at Freetown Farm, as I mentioned, but I'm also teaching in a nourishing garden program. So I'm busy on Saturdays and during the week on certain nights. So I got a lot going on. Very happy though. All right. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Sunday and good luck in your gardens. And I will talk with you again soon, I'm sure.